Thank you, Esther. Thank you, Athena Center. Thank you, Columbia Business School, for doing this, because even though I work for Harvard Business School, I actually am a CBS alum. So it was 2012, so it's very exciting to be back on campus and seeing that there is progress being made in this field, especially with women leadership and entrepreneurship, because there wasn't a lot when we were here. We pushed it and we created a lot of different things, but it's exciting to see that it hasn't fallen on deaf ears and there's more and more happening. So thank you all for being here today. I'm going to start, and as Esther mentioned, my talk is about mistakes, because I really don't believe you make mistakes, but mistakes make you as a person. They define your journey. So I'm going to start with a question. What do you think of when you hear the word mistake? Anybody?
Embarrassment.
Okay.
Failure.
Okay.
Setback.
Okay.
Doing something wrong.
Okay.
Education.
Okay. So, well, go ahead.
Correction.
Correction.
I said teachable moment.
Teachable moment. Great. Is that everything? Oh,
To be positive. Opportunity.
I love it. Okay, so I love that I heard half and half, because we started with the negatives: embarrassment, failure, and then we moved into opportunity, teachable moment, learning experience, and I think that's great, because I think when most people think about mistakes, they start on the negative side. They think, they dwell on the things that are wrong, the things that you're embarrassed by, or they see it as a failure. But I will say it is a teachable moment. It is a learning opportunity. It's a way for you to define your path and your journey in a way that's right for you. And if you had told me years ago when I was in college that I would be doing what I'm doing now, I would have probably laughed. I would have been, I would have thought you were a crazy person, because in college, I was actually pre-med. I was a sociology major with a minor in chemistry. I went to organic chemistry class, I went to physics class, I took embryonic biology, and I took all the classes you take to get into med school. I took the MCAT, applied to medical school, was on my path to medical school, and that's what I had always thought I was going to do up until a month before graduation. And I stopped and I thought about what that actually meant, and thought about, what do I really want to do in life? And who am I as a person? And I realized that wasn't really going to be me as a doctor. And that was because one of the things that I started to better understand, growing up, I'd wanted to be a pediatrician. I wanted to give back. I wanted to help children. I wanted to help heal. And what I realized is where the world of medicine was going in the States, I wasn't going to have full autonomy and control over how I treated my patients, or the way I was going to be thinking about what was best for my patients. There was going to be a whole nother organization, whether it was an HMO or insurance companies or providers, telling me what I needed to do and the parameters that needed to be set for me to treat these patients. And I really was having a dilemma about this. And I sat there and I realized my dilemma was that I don't deal well with so many parameters. I don't like being boxed in. So medical school was not going to be for me. But now I was 4 years into college. I'd spent the last 6 years of my life working as a pharmacy technician. I had volunteered numerous hours at a hospital. I was a sociology major and didn't have any real world experience, and I was graduating in a month. So what was I going to do? And that's when you have to listen to opportunity, and that's when you have to really think about where are you going to go with this. And at that point, one of my friends in college was going to take the LSAT. And she's like, well, why don't you take it with me? And I said, okay, well, I don't know very much about the LSAT, but let me take a look at what it means. And what I realized was the LSAT, to succeed at the LSAT, you have to be very good at logic. And that was one of the traits that I realized I was always good at. I loved the logic games. I know most people don't. It's my strong suit. So I figured, why not? Let's take the LSAT. And it was that opportunity for me to see that, okay, well, I didn't go to med school, but that's okay. It was a learning opportunity. I knew I wasn't good at authority. I wasn't good at working within parameters. So I did what every other college student who doesn't know what they want to be when they grow up does. They go to law school. So I went to law school. I went to law school in Chicago. And that's important because I went to law school right off of Michigan Avenue at Northwestern. And during law school, I learned a lot of things. One of the things was I learned what it meant to be a lawyer. I had never really looked into the profession because I had spent my entire life thinking I was going to be a doctor. And I learned, okay, well, there are different parts to the law. There's litigation, there's corporate law, there's securities law. All right, I realized I liked corporate law. Litigation wasn't for me, but corporate was really interesting for me. I had never really looked into mergers and acquisitions, and I'd never looked into IPOs, but this was my opportunity, and I was learning more and more about that in law school. The other thing I learned in law school was I love to shop. I was never a big shopper, but going to law school off of Michigan Avenue, I started to develop a shopping habit. And that, I know, seems really trivial right now, but actually is a big part of my story. So all my lunches, free times, I spent perusing Michigan Avenue, buying stuff, and it got to a point where when I came to class every afternoon, the people behind me are like, oh, so what'd you buy today? What's in the shopping bags today? Which is good and bad. Probably a mistake to spend money shopping when you're paying tuition and don't have an income, but that's okay. It was a learning opportunity for me because after a while, what I realized was that I was getting tired of what was being offered at the retailers. It wasn't any big epiphany. I just got tired of buying what was there. So what did I do? I convinced my sister that we should start making things for ourselves. I wasn't thinking about entrepreneurship. I was just thinking about what did I want to wear. And what did I want to do? And I thought fashion was very exciting. This is when I started to get obsessed with the world of fashion and understand it. And so we decided to start making clothes for ourselves. And when we did this, it was really interesting because we had folks that would come up to us and say, oh, where did you buy that? Can I buy that? Where can I buy that? That's really cute. I was like, oh, no, we just made it for ourselves. There's only one piece. Didn't really think anything of it until that kept happening. And I was like, oh, Chicago doesn't have as much to offer as New York and LA, and so it's just folks in Chicago. Until I was in LA on Rodeo Drive wearing one of the dresses we had made, and somebody stopped me again and said, that's amazing, where can I buy that dress? I said, well, you can't, but maybe in 6 months you can. So the idea of starting a business started to germinate. Mind you, at this time I'm still in law school. So, decided to start looking into what that meant and jumped right in. And I will say one of the best ways to learn about any industry or anything is really to jump in and do it versus thinking about it. And so that's really what got me started on the path to fashion and my entrepreneurial journey, I would say. That was the first time I started a business. And we were designing and we were, having the product made overseas and we were wholesaling the product. We did a fashion show at Lollapalooza. We even had the opportunity to make a pair of pants for Prince, which was amazing, especially now that I'm looking back at it. He was a phenomenal, phenomenal person and really changed the course of music and a lot of other things. And so I was doing this. I was running this fashion company, not really realizing I was an entrepreneur because back then It wasn't in vogue to be an entrepreneur. That wasn't a thing. People didn't talk about that. Everybody in business school and law school went to go work for the big finance companies or the big law firms, and people worked for the big consulting firms. But no one talked about entrepreneurship. Nobody, and so I didn't even realize that that's what I was doing. For me, I was running a fashion business, and that's what was exciting. And that was great. But at the same time, the other thing I realized was I also wanted to continue to learn as a lawyer. So now I had two careers. And I'd spent a lot of time on both, and if anybody knows anything about being an M&A attorney, I know bankers complain, but when they go home, they leave the work for the attorneys. So spending all my time working, I would come home from the office and then get on a call with India to talk about production for my company. And I realized I couldn't continue to do both. It wasn't going to work. But I also realized that as much as I loved fashion, I didn't want to be a fashion designer. And that was okay. It was okay for me to shut down my label and to say, okay, I've gotten what I want out of this career of mine. And I learned. I liked the fashion industry, but I also learned I didn't want to be a designer. I didn't want to be on the design or the creative side of the industry, but I wanted to be on the business side. And that was something that I took with me from that experience and kept it close to me. I knew that was something that I would go back to in life, but it just wasn't the right time now. And I think that in itself, it was difficult. And every person in here who has ever been an entrepreneur, who has ever thought about entrepreneurship, you almost see that as a failure. It is. You're shutting down the company. You're closing the baby that you started, that you created. It no longer is going to exist. But to me, it was a way to learn. And it was a way to say, okay, that was great. It was fun. I got all of these great experiences out of it. But what do I really want to do? So that was something that I took with me as I continued to practice. And I continued to practice corporate law. But what was happening there as well was I was working on these multi-billion-dollar mergers. We, IPO'd a bunch of companies, and we bought 21 companies and rolled them up, and we did a bunch of acquisitions, and that was great. But I always wanted to be on the other side of the table where the client was sitting. It was much more exciting from their perspective, is what I also realized. And like I said, I grew up in a house that was very medical focused. I come from an immigrant family. Medicine and engineering are probably the two careers you usually take. So I'd never learned very much about mergers. I'd never really learned about business from this perspective and at this scale. And as I spent more and more time as an attorney, I learned I wanted to be on the other side of the table. I wanted to be the business person. I wanted to be the person whose company was being bought or sold or merged or IPO'd. And so what did I do? Well, 6.5 years into practicing law, after I had been the first year and the second year and done all the grueling hours, I told my partners at the law firm when they came to me and said, okay, now you're going to be a 7th year, we should talk about your partnership track, and we want you to be a partner. I said, well, that's great. I'm really flattered, and I love working with you guys, and I learned a lot, but this is my time to step away. Because I know I don't want to be a partner at a law firm forever. And it was 2009 when everybody thought I was crazy because of the financial crisis. I mean, people were trying to hold on to jobs as much as they could. But for me, I knew that if I went down that path, it wasn't going to be the right path for me. And as much as people would see that as a mistake, I said, I'm going to take it as a learning opportunity, and I'm going to leave, and I'm going to leave on a high note, and I'm going to say to myself, you know what, I'm going to go give myself a chance, because that inkling of being on the business side of fashion had never left me. That was something that stayed with me for my time as I continued to practice. And as a lot of you know, if you've been following the entrepreneurial ecosystem in New York for the last 10 years or so, 2009, 2010 was actually a pivotal time in entrepreneurship because of the financial crisis. There were more and more people starting companies because they couldn't get jobs. That was also the time that you were starting to see that fashion tech was starting to become a sector. And that was exciting for me because now there was a place to be on the business side of fashion. And so, I left the law firm and decided that I was going to go start my fashion tech company. I had this idea. It was always in the back of my mind. It was from my learnings as a startup founder in fashion. I wish there was a way to solve the cash flow problems. I wish there was a way to tell the stories of emerging designers. I wish there was a way to help the creative designers from the business side because I saw them struggle as I went through that journey. And so I started down the path of starting a fashion tech business. And very quickly I realized this was going to be very tough because I no longer had the relationships and the network in the industry to make this a reality. And that was, the first time that I realized how important network really was. And that's when I decided to go back to business school. So I said, I'm going to go to Columbia because it's in New York City. I can spend 2 years getting to know the fashion industry in New York. I can get to know the industry, the entrepreneurial industry that's really starting to grow. And this is going to be exciting. And I'll spend the 2 years in school working on my business. So I went back to business school. Took my idea and actually revised it and improved upon it and launched it as I graduated. And I launched TrendSeeder at the time as an e-commerce platform that was solving all the issues that I knew designers had. So pre-selling products so we could solve that cash flow problem. Telling the stories of the designers, getting them a bigger forum by communicating for them and on behalf of them, creating social media content for them, creating the opportunity, and then helping them kind of think through how they were going to organize their business so that they could be profitable. And that was great. And we had, 75 designers on board and we were selling stuff. And then I also realized a few more things. Realized, I don't really like selling stuff. It was fine, but that was the basis of my entire business. I also realized was that, all of these, a majority of these designers kept coming to me and saying, this is great, but can you also help me with fundraising and finance and legal and strategy and marketing? And I was like, okay, let's take a step back. I can't afford to consult for you all for free, and you can't afford to pay me for all of that stuff. So is there a better way to do this? Is there a better way to create something that's going to be more beneficial than what I've created? And that was hard, right? Because I'd spent 2 years of my life in business school building towards something, and I launched it, and I was very proud of it, and it was really exciting, and everybody knew what I was working on because I was very vocal and very public in school, and that was what every project was based on. And now I realize that's not really what I wanted to do. And that probably wasn't the right answer to solve these issues. So I took a look around, and I took a look at what was happening around me in the ecosystem, and looked at what Y Combinator and Techstars and all of these accelerators were doing. And I considered joining one of them when I was, building TrendSeeder, and the feedback I always got from the fashion tech founders was, it's great if you want to perfect your product. It's great if you want to meet, if you want to meet the investors, if you want to make sure you've got everything on the technical side set, you're thinking about your business the right way. But it's not great if you need to build, your access or your pipeline to customers, because they don't have those relationships. And that was my aha moment. That was my aha moment of saying, okay, well, I have all of these mentors because I had spent 2 years in business school building out my network of, folks in the fashion industry who had very generously said to me, we love the idea of supporting young talent. How can we be helpful? How can we help these companies? I had at this point been to business school, law school, taken the MCAT, taken a bunch of bar exams. I was like, I can write a curriculum. And I had companies that needed the help. And so I decided I was going to launch the first fashion-focused accelerator in New York. Now, I think if I'd stopped to think about what that really meant, I might not have done it. Techstars Y Combinator started with millions and millions of dollars, with a lot of people who had a lot of contacts, who had a lot of time, who had made their money in entrepreneurship, and now were giving back to the community. But I saw it as an opportunity. I saw it as, based on what I've learned about myself and my skill set and what I enjoy doing and where I see a need in the marketplace, this is what I have to build. So I launched it as the first fashion accelerator in 2014 and learned a lot of things. It was very well received, but I also learned all the things I did wrong. You couldn't run a fashion accelerator as a 3-month program. You couldn't take companies super early, because sometimes to perfect product, it can take a designer a year and a half. And so we perfected that along the way and created what it is now, and it's this platform. It's this platform where we leverage network to add value to startups. And we provide education, mentorship, business development opportunities, and access to strategic capital. And from this, what I've learned is it's about access for entrepreneurs. It's access to the right knowledge and access to the right opportunities that really changes the game. And that's what really changes the world for entrepreneurs. And that's something that has stuck with me. And from there, what ended up happening was, ironically, Harvard Business School came knocking on my door because they wanted to start something in New York City to support their alumni entrepreneurs. And at the core of what every business school is about, it's their network, right? And so they said, well, what you have is a really interesting framework. You have something that no one's ever really done. You've put structure around network in a way that's value add for entrepreneurs, but you can still build something really successful around that. Can you come in and build that for us? So continued to run TrendSeeder. Decided at that point also that I needed to bring in a partner, because at this point I was doing everything by myself, and now to take on the Harvard thing, I needed to bring in a partner. So I actually brought in my partner, started the Harvard Business School Startup Studio, and have been running that for the last few years. Well, along the way, I also realized that all of the fashion, beauty, health and wellness, consumer companies we were dealing with that were selling product were running into working capital issues. And they were all raising venture dollars to fund working capital, or they were giving up personal guarantees for bank loans, which both seemed really onerous for people who were selling product that they knew they would make 80% margin on. They could pay back the loan in 6 months. And they needed it to be able to scale their company. So that's where the idea for Ember came from. The idea was really, how do you plug into the problems that people are having, and how do you add value? And it's always come from this idea of adding value to folks. And so I launched Ember last summer. And so now I have 5 jobs, but they're all wonderful and they all work together, and it's all about helping people. But I will say the journey wasn't easy. I think there were a lot of mistakes that were made. Mistake number 1, should I have been pre-med? Was that, something that, would I have been better off going to business school? Well, you know what? I think what's interesting about my journey was the sociology pre-med gave me a different perspective. And actually, as I'm reviewing companies now who are using nanotechnology to deliver, certain products to certain wrinkles on your face, I can actually understand the science behind it. So was it a mistake? No, it was a learning opportunity. I learned I didn't want to be a doctor, but I also learned that I wasn't good at structure. I knew I had to start my own company because I don't do well with structure. I also learned that there was knowledge that I had that somebody else didn't, and that's what put me on the path that I was going down. Going to law school, people ask me all the time, do you regret it? You went to law school and then 10 years later went to business school. What's the point? Do you regret that entire period? And no. law school taught me a way of thinking that I think is really unique. And I think that was the skill set I picked up from law school. The other thing I learned in law school was I loved business. I had no other real interaction with business people at the levels that I did when I was working as a lawyer. I also learned that these are skill sets that you can continue to apply to whatever you do next. My legal training, even though I don't practice every day, is something that I use every single day. So was it a mistake? No, because I can actually be so much more value add to all of our portfolio companies. I can actually read their contracts and tell them not to get into certain pitfalls that you see a lot of companies get into. So I think, really what I want to say here is and I think Steve Jobs actually said it best in that Stanford speech, where you can't connect the dots going forward, you're always going to connect the dots going backwards. And you'll see how it all works together. And no path is the right path. No time is, the only time to be an entrepreneur. I think it's really important to understand that everybody's journey is going to be different. Everybody's going to take a different path. And it's really important to learn from all of these women and all of the leaders how they got there and what got them there, but also understand that your journey, your path, the way you're going to get there, what you're going to do in life is going to be really different. And you have to continue to learn from everything that you're doing. The mistakes you make are actually learning opportunities to learn about yourself, to learn about your journey. And it's about the journey. It's really, it's not that end game. Great, everybody wants to build a very successful business, but what did you learn getting there? How did you get there? And those are the things that are going to make you a better leader, a better person, and a better entrepreneur through life that are going to stick with you and that you're going to take to no matter what you do next. It's really, that's how I would think about it. And I think, and that's why I think you don't make mistakes, mistakes make you. So there might be mistakes in the sense that maybe I didn't need to go to, pre-med and I didn't need to take organic chemistry and maybe I didn't need to go to law school to do what I'm doing. But I would argue I wouldn't be doing what I'm doing now if I hadn't learned everything that I had learned along the way to create something that's been bigger and more exciting than something that I would have ever thought that I would have built. So don't be afraid of mistakes. Don't be afraid of the failure. Failure is not negative. Mistakes are not negative. It's the emotions that we attach to them that makes them negative. It's your perspective on the mistake. It's your perspective on the failure that's going to guide you. And I think, from a failure perspective, Sara Blakely's story is a great one. And for those of you who don't know who Sara Blakely is, she's the founder of Spanx and one of the very few self-made female billionaires out there. She bombed the LSAT. She wanted to be a lawyer. Well, that didn't happen. Then she wanted to be Goofy at Disney World. That didn't happen because she was too short. So she kept getting rejected, and the job she actually ended up getting was selling fax machines. And selling fax machines is not an easy job, and people would, kick her out of offices, they would kick her out of buildings, they would rip up her business card. But what she learned in doing that was that she was a great salesperson. She did it for 7 years. She was one of the youngest leaders to rise through the sales force. And she's like, I need to build something that I can sell to people because I'm good at selling things to people. And so when she finally had that idea for Spanx, which came because she needed to wear something underneath white pants, and she's like, I need to solve this problem, she saw that opportunity to be able to sell that to other women. And she never looked back. And I think, it's hard. You will fail. It's not easy. The highs are high, the lows are low. And there are a lot more lows than are highs when you're an entrepreneur, but that's okay. Learn from those lows. Learn, what you want to do, what you don't want to do. Learn what you did right, what you did wrong, what you can do better, and take that to the next level. And I think all of you can be really successful if you do that. So I will just leave you with that. And I know we're opening it up for a Q&A, so I'm happy to answer questions. But I really want everybody, as they leave this room, to think about that and to take that with you. Take the fact that mistakes, you don't make them. They make you. It'll help define your path. It'll help define your journey. Find the good. Use it as a learning opportunity. Use it as a way to move you forward, not hold you back. Anybody have questions about anything? Starting companies, failures, what to do next?
Yeah, I actually have a question about how would you keep the momentum? Like, keep trying things and it doesn't work, or perhaps you have another thought that you want to pursue, but all the way I think it's really needs energy and, keep yourself motivated and pursue what you want.
Yeah, I think, you can keep the momentum, but doesn't mean you always have to be working on it. Like I said, I took about a 4-year break in between the time that I shut down my first venture, but had that inkling in my head, knew there was something there, I didn't know what it was. And it wasn't until I really had figured it out, until the environment was the right time, right place to start that company, that I actually started at it again. So I would say it's, you don't have to feel like you always have to continue to move forward. It's okay to take a break. But I think just continue to learn from everything around you and continue to think about how you can accomplish what you need to accomplish and when the right time is to do that and what you need for that to come to fruition. So it's just, I think it's, and to your point, you will have to keep pushing forward because the lows are low. But it's listening to the marketplace, listening to yourself and understanding where that opportunity is and where your idea fits within that opportunity and then striking at that time. So I will say what I also learned was it wasn't so much fashion that's my passion. I think my passion is helping and connecting and growing companies in the consumer space. Now, I spend most of my time in the consumer space, but at the core of what I love doing and what drives me and what excites me every morning and every night that I go to bed, I spent my day helping some entrepreneur achieve their goals. And that's what drives me now. So as far as, why was I working as a lawyer when I wanted to do fashion, I also knew what I didn't know. And I didn't hate working as a lawyer. I took it as an opportunity to learn. So it's just the same way as going back to business school was an opportunity for me to learn. Being in the law was an opportunity for me to learn about things that I didn't know, things that I knew would be helpful. Now, as I said, I didn't know how helpful they would be as I went along in my career, but they were always value add. So I guess for me it was, all of us want to be the CEO of an amazing company that we started that's worth $1 billion, right? But we can't all just start there. So the question is, what is that passion and how are you building towards it?
Why should you give entrepreneurs who have made serious financial mistakes in the sense that they raise outside capital, anywhere from $3 million to say they've been involved in $12 million outside of third-party capital. They're scaling, they're going to pay really great, and then something happens and they lose all that third-party money. How do you help that entrepreneur get up the next day? How do they respond to their investors? What's their next play? And these are people that are here for your mission and years ago, maybe your trip. These are people who are 40 or 50 years old. There's a lot of things about that.
Yeah. So I think it goes back to seeing, shit happens, and that's the reality of the startup world. Nothing goes the way it's planned. Everybody's probably got a great PowerPoint and business plan, and it's all packaged and beautiful, and strategically it all makes sense, but it's never going to go that way. But is there an opportunity to turn that around? What are you going to learn? Why did that happen? What caused them to lose that money? What caused that situation, and how do you turn that around? What was the underlying issue that really led to that demise? I think that's what people don't think about. People worry about the outcome and don't use it as a way to learn and figure out how to solve it. And I think that's what you have to do. You get into problem solving mode. How are you going to save the assets that you do have? How are you going to build the assets you can? What are you going to do with the cash you have left, and how do you turn that into more cash? How do you turn money into more money? And that's really fundamentally at the core of all of these businesses. That's what they should be thinking about, and I don't think people do. But it's also some of that is also managing cash flow. It's also being smarter about, okay, what bills do I need to pay now? And what bills can I pay later? Take that cash, sell product, turn that into more cash, and then maybe I'll pay that bill, but then I've made more cash off of the cash instead of paying that. It's just, I think, strategically looking at what the problems are and opportunities are, and figuring out how you're gonna turn that around. Is that helpful?
Do you have an opinion on the market? How you maintaining a competitive edge while also as a company involved, and but also continuing to come up through our company solutions and what you have to offer?
Yeah, I think you have to stay core to your brand and your consumer. I think that's where a lot of companies have gone wrong, is when they stray off of that and when they try to do too much. I think you can still innovate, you can still continue to be better at serving your customer and still be competitive without changing your brand DNA.
Does that happen for you? Besides like the landscape changes, how do you not be
Stale. I think it's hard. I think a lot of even big companies, public companies, make this mistake, and which is why someone like a J. Crew falters, right? When they went from their core sweater sets to trying to do sequence blazers for $500, their core consumer got really confused as to who they were as a brand. And I think it's very easy, especially as an entrepreneur, to see all of this fruit and say, oh, I'm going to go for that. Oh, I'm going to go for that. I think you have to stay focused. You have to stay focused on what it is that you're building that is essential for your customers. Why are they coming to you and using your product, or why are they using your company? And then how do you add value to that, right? How do you continue to build on that but not change who you are as a company completely? Still keep true to your core DNA, but make the experience better. Is it new technologies? Is it new offerings? And I think when you know what your brand DNA is, you always use that as the test. And I think you have to have barriers on your company. What are the things that you're going to do and not going to do? What are the things that work for you and don't work for you? Who are you as a company? And I think you have to stay true to that, because a lot of companies, as they're scaling and growing, falter. And I think a great example of that is Swell water bottles. I don't know how many of you own a Swell water bottle, but I see one on the floor right there. Swell is a one-product company. She does hundreds of millions of dollars in revenue. She completely owns that company and has, ridiculous margin, 70-80% margin on that product. But instead of offering new items, the way she's changed it is she's just changed the colors. She's changed the patterns. She's gone into the B2B business, but she's still selling a water bottle that is, more eco-friendly, and that's the core of her business. And she hasn't changed that business. And that's what's helped her grow a business that's, hundreds of millions of dollars and profitable versus trying to do too many items and losing herself and spending a lot of money doing things that maybe her customers don't care about. So her creative way was getting into the B2B game. So she was selling water bottles directly, but then doing a deal with Google and having Google brand the water bottles and buying, 100,000 of them or 1 million of them. That's how she's bringing additional revenue into the company and growing that company. But she's still staying true to what she is as a brand and a company.
I think,
Sorry, are we almost out of time? So globally, one thing that is a trend is every startup that I've met wants to at some point come to the US because the market is massive. The opportunity is massive. The other thing I've learned is, depending on where you are in the world, your needs are different because there are parts of the world like Finland who have very, very strong engineering talent, and Israel, which has very strong engineering talent, but they don't necessarily have the soft skills. They don't have the people who do the marketing, and so it's interesting to see that because in New York and San Francisco and the US generally, I think for most startups, especially on the tech side, what we're seeing is a lack of engineering talent. And a lot of people who want to do marketing and biz dev and work in those areas. So that's been a difference. But what remains the same is it's tough to build a business. And the ones that win are the ones that have the access to the opportunities, access to capital, access to the right knowledge base. And the trends, it depends on where you are in the world. It depends on what the core problems are in that area, which is where a lot of entrepreneurs start, trying to solve for the issues that they're seeing or they're feeling or they're working with on a day-to-day basis.